Welcome to the Escape the System channel. I'm Joe Barnes, author of the books The Rebel Code and Escape the System. And in today's video, I'm going to be reacting to the recent Louis Theroux Netflix documentary on the Manosphere. Now, the way I'm going to break down this video is just by covering the 4 different characters that appeared in the documentary. That was HSTikkyTokky first, then Justin Waller, then Myron Gaines, and then finally Sneako. I'm going to give my views on each of them, how they came across, and also talk about some of the wider issues that come up with the Manosphere. So we're talking misogyny, we're talking about scamming, we're talking about monogamous or one-way monogamous relationships, all the kind of different talking points. Anyway, let's get into the documentary reaction. First up, we had HSTikkyTokky, and Louis meets him and they talk, and of all the influencers on the show, he seems the most immature. Maybe he is the youngest. I think he's 23 or 24 years old. And his content seems to appeal to 13, 14 or 15-year-olds. And as immature as they are, I still don't see how they find him particularly interesting or engaging. He films various different stunts. He's trying to rage bait a lot of the time. He also has a couple of kind of henchmen or his crew who go around with him, and they contact what they call predators. So they suspect that somebody, or perhaps they lure somebody, pretending to be teenage girls and then meeting up with him, and then they basically attack this predator. So this gives you a bit of an idea about the kind of content he releases. He doesn't seem to have a deeper... He talks about escaping the matrix, but I don't think he really knows what it means, because he's very materialistic himself. And if you want to escape the matrix, a big part of that is no longer being so materialistic. The other issue raised by Louis was his trading platforms and whether he was a potential scammer. And this is something I come across time and again with the Manosphere. Andrew Tate talks about it as well. He has his own real world or university where he teaches people various methods of getting financial independence. And one of them is trading. Trading typically with crypto, or I'm guessing perhaps stocks and shares as well. And the thing I would say to anyone watching this and thinking that that's a legitimate way of escaping is it's not easy. You know, trading or investing is like any skill. You've got to master it. You've got to become good at it. And that can take years and years of study, practice and failure. And ultimately, yeah, it might be the vehicle that wins you your financial freedom. But I'd be very surprised that it would be as quick as somebody like HSTikkyTokky would make out. So basically, he signs people up for his trading platform, and Louis actually signs up for it, puts £500 in. I think a few months later reveals that he's down to about £150. But that doesn't really matter to HS because he makes money whether you do or not. So I don't know if it is a scam. I haven't investigated enough, but I would just say be careful about that, because ultimately the only people those courses truly benefit is Andrew Tate, is HSTikkyTokky. It's not made to help you. If you benefit as a result of it, well, that's a kind of side effect. It wasn't the original intention. The original intention is to make them rich. Then we moved on to Justin Waller. So of all the different people interviewed on the documentary, I found Justin Waller the most likable, or the most relatable. That's not to say he's a super likable guy, but he seemed the one who had his head screwed on the most and had the best life view out of all of them. Partly maybe because he'd actually made money before he became an influencer. Apparently he ran some kind of steel mining, steel construction business. I don't know exactly what it was. And it was interesting. He was quite honest about his net worth, which was still in a very impressive 30 million. But he didn't do what Andrew Tate does and bullshit and claim he's worth $700 million. So that was a bit more likable about him. You also see his home environment, where he has a wife, or I don't know whether his actual wife. I don't think it's his wife. No, he's not married to her, but a partner who he has 2 kids with, one on the way. Now, the interesting thing about him was that he said he was in a one-way monogamous relationship with his wife. And she seemed to be okay with it. And Louis was sort of standing there, you know, arms folded. How can you like this? How can you put up with this? But she seemed quite happy. He also wanted to say to her, you know, how could you give up your career as some kind of nurse that she was? I think a specialized nurse in some way. And she was like, I don't miss waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go and do the job. Yeah, I quite enjoyed it, but it came with a whole load of hassles, and her life now as Justin's partner is far better and far more enjoyable. And I thought, of course it is. And I don't know why this idea is pushed on women, that their life working a stressful or boring or super demanding job is some way going to be better than motherhood, looking after kids, and you know, the man going out to do the stressful, boring job. I mean, men don't particularly enjoy that. So why would women suddenly want a piece of that? It doesn't make you more equal or enhance your status that you spend your life doing things you don't want to do. So I don't know why Louis was so incredulous about the idea that she could like that lifestyle. One criticism of Justin Waller is, I think it's fine if you want an open relationship, an open marriage, it's your choice. And I don't think moralizers should look down on you or think that in some way that's an inferior relationship. However, I don't quite agree with this monogamous in one direction. So the man says, right, I can go away and sleep with as many women as possible, but you have to stay monogamous to me. I think if you're going to go for it, it's got to be both ways. It's not really fair otherwise. And then we moved on to Myron Gaines. And of all the characters in the show, he seemed the least alpha, the least manly to me, as they would like to define themselves, as they like to define masculinity. Reason being, he was a very controlling guy, very controlling of his girlfriend at the time and very controlling of the situation. And anyone who exerts that amount of control over other people is always a very insecure person and is always masking weakness. I think at one point Louis went out of his podcast show to talk to one of the producers, or so a woman who helped run the show, and Myron realized this and was frantically sending her text messages telling her not to communicate with Louis and etc. etc. And then you saw a very awkward interview with Myron and his girlfriend at the time and Louis, and again I think Myron was another one of these who had this one-way monogamous relationship, and she clearly wasn't too happy about that, and Myron felt very uncomfortable not being able to control what was going on. So I didn't get a very good impression of him. Also, he has his podcast episodes where there's a group of women and him and another guy, and okay, these women are bimbos, they're dummies and maybe sluts, okay, but they're still people, and the way he insults them to their faces and is just generally very, very unpleasant. I don't think anyone deserves that, even a bimbo and a slut. They don't need to be insulted like that. It's just not pleasant, and that's the thing I think this Manosphere thing totally lacks, is just basic decency. You know, you may want to escape the matrix, that's commendable. You may want to be greater freedom in your life, which is a really good thing. Doesn't mean you have to be an arsehole. You can still be decent to other people, even people you don't, their way of life you don't agree with. You don't have to insult them. But I think that's what this whole Manosphere is about. It's about clout rather than message. Doing things which provoke reactions rather than actually explaining subjects in a deeper way, a deeper, more meaningful way. It's all about the short soundbite, all about the thing which can grab attention. And by insulting these women, I don't find it funny at all. I don't know what kind of low intellect you've got to have to find that actually entertaining and amusing. But again, maybe even someone like Myron, who's, I don't know how old he is, late 30s, 40, around that, is again appealing to 13 and 14-year-old kids, and that's what they find entertaining. Then we moved on to the final character, which was Sneako. It's here we went into a slightly different sphere of the manosphere. Sneako started getting more into politics and conspiracy theories. First of all, before I break that down, we did have a few clips of him simulating slapping women and saying that he didn't think women should be allowed to vote. And I can't agree with this at all. Women should get back in the kitchen. That was another example he used. Now, I'm anti-feminism as feminism is today. I think it's gone way overboard. I think it's done what it's needed to do, and the pendulum swung too far in that direction. Yet at the same time, it's making silly comments about women getting back in the kitchen or shouldn't be allowed to vote doesn't really do anything to add intelligent debate to that whole issue of has feminism gone too far. You may have a point, yeah, feminism has gone too far, but the way to counter that is not by saying get back in the kitchen. If you really, and especially when it comes to voting, if you look back into how Western democracies got the vote for women, starting, or most famously starting in the UK with Emmeline Pankhurst, that woman and the women around her were the people who were challenging the system at the time. These were really, quite admirable women and people who saw what was wrong, stood up for a cause and fought for it. That's all the great qualities we should admire. We shouldn't be saying, no, they shouldn't have a vote. Anyway, Sneako didn't focus too much on that. The conversation with Louis veered off into the conspiracy theory direction and how there's a Jewish cabal running the world. Now, do I believe this? Because I talk about the elites. In one of my more popular videos, I talked about the kings, the facilitators, and the poor, and how this ecosystem exists, and how basically the facilitators and the poor, which are about 99% of the world's population, live and work to ensure that the kings can do what they want. So on the surface, you may think I'd agree with him, but I just don't know. I can't say definitively that there is a Jewish cabal running the world. And just because people are making certain signs with their hands or using certain numbers really doesn't mean much. There's not evidence that there's some hidden hand behind everything. Now, do elites keep the world running in their favor? Absolutely. Is it completely coordinated behind the scenes? Probably not. I tend to think greed and incompetence runs this world rather than a malicious conspiracy. It's more than just Jewish people who are in that elite. I know some of them exert a tremendous amount of influence, but there are elites in every country of the world. You've got African dictators or African politicians who probably have hundreds of millions, and they are considered one of the elite. They're not part of this Jewish cabal. So I find it difficult to believe, and I can't take that too seriously. And I would advise anyone else looking into the manosphere that, take that with a pinch of salt. So in summing it up, I found the whole documentary quite amusing. One thing I did like right at the end, it was with HSTikkyTokky and his mum. And they actually got Louis back because HSTikkyTokky kept mentioning Jimmy Savile and how Louis was mates with Jimmy Savile. And he was a little bit. I remember watching his initial documentary with Savile. He was in awe of him. And Louis tries to backtrack, and I think he did a documentary after that one saying how he was tricked and he didn't realise, but I think he's just bullshitting. I think he did quite like Savile. And Louis got caught out there because TikkyTokky pointed out that he's just basically doing the same thing Louis is doing. Louis is trying to create sensation. He's doing it for clout. There's not some deeper message or meaning behind his documentaries. He may be a good documentary maker. He may be quite likable and entertaining. But at the end of the day, he's doing exactly the same thing that those guys are doing. He's trying to get sensational footage and responses. And it was quite amusing how Harrison brought up Jimmy Savile and how Louis didn't really have much to say about that. So I found that quite entertaining. So overall, yeah, a good watch. I could recommend watching it probably more for entertainment value than anything. You're not really going to learn anything from these guys. Okay, hope you enjoyed that video. There will be more coming in the future. Thanks for watching. If you want to comment below, please do. If you want to help the channel out, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.